Moi everyone and welcome to Finish Your Plate. Pork is a popular alternative to beef in Finland, and one of the lesser known cuts, at least outside of Finland, maybe a couple other countries, Germany, Sweden, is the Kassler steak, which is basically pork shoulder that has been cut so that it resembles a steak. So it's a cheap alternative to beef steak, but it's just as tasty, and it's often served on weekdays. So join me and I'll show you how to make this Finnish pork steak. First, let's do a simple marinade for the pork. I have the usual marinade ingredients here. Some soy sauce for salt, some red wine vinegar for acid, then some spices, garlic, paprika powder, black pepper, some celery seed ground, some mustard that will act as an emulsifier, some ground allspice, and rosemary ground, and some onion powder. Typically Finnish marinades are not very sweet, unlike American barbecue sauce type marinades, for example. So that's why I'm leaving the sugar component out this time. So let's start by adding a couple garlic cloves in here. Okay, now that the garlic is in, I'm gonna add a couple of teaspoons of the mustard. This mustard does actually have some sugar in it. It's a mustard that I made myself, so there will be some sugar in here, but not a whole lot. That's more like a tablespoon of mustard. Now let's add a tablespoon of paprika, another tablespoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of celery seed. This is very potent stuff. You don't need a lot of it. And a teaspoon of allspice, rosemary, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, half a tablespoon of salt, half a cup of red wine vinegar, an equal amount of soy sauce. And now we'll just blitz this together. My stick blender is also going to break the peppercorns up, so they don't need to be pre-ground. Now that our base is ready, I'm going to drizzle in about a cup of neutral cooking oil. That was maybe not so much of a drizzle as just a straight pour, but at the end we should have this pretty viscous liquid, kind of like a dressing type, and actually the method is very similar to making a salad dressing. Our marinade is now ready. Now let's prep our Kassler steaks. I have here some pork shoulder. This is a big package. It actually has 2 pork shoulders in here. But let's take one of them out and let's see if we can cut it into any kind of steak shaped pieces. So pork shoulder is this pretty weird shaped piece of meat, and Kassler steaks are basically just pieces that have been cut from pork shoulder that kind of resemble steaks. So let's first cut away this odd piece from the side. Let's make this a little bit more even and trim the sides a little bit. Now these trim pieces, obviously they're not going to go to waste. You could make pulled pork with them or use them in some sort of meat sauce, or even grind them up and use it whenever a recipe calls for mixed pork and beef. Or you could even use this in a Karelian stew. So I had the piece trimmed out kind of like a loin, so we could definitely slice a few steaks out of this now. Don't make the steaks too thick. And easier said than done, try to keep them a little bit even thickness. You could always use a meat tenderizer and pound them a little bit more evenly if they don't come out even thickness. And I'm gonna put my steaks in here in a Ziploc bag, and we're gonna then pour the marinade over it and let them marinate for a good 4 to 8 hours. There we go, that's a nice looking steak. I keep using the word steak. Obviously these are not beef, so some people may get upset. But in Finland, these are called Kassler steaks. This one looks nice, but I can tell it came out considerably thicker than the others. I may just want to pound this out just a little bit to thin it out. I'll just take my meat tenderizer and give it a couple of good whacks. There we go. That is all that's needed. Now that I've cut the meat, I'm gonna pour in my marinade here. And like I said, this is going to go in the fridge to marinate for several hours. Just make sure that they get evenly coated and get all the air out of the plastic bag. All right, and now let's evenly coat them. And this goes in a bowl and in the fridge. All right, meanwhile, let's make a sauce for our Kassler steak. I have here about 1.5 cups of wild mushrooms that were dried and now have been reconstituted. I'm just going to run my knife through them. And let's make a roux. So I put in here about 2 tablespoons of butter. Gonna add equal amount of flour. And let this just cook for a couple of minutes. And here I have the liquid that I used to reconstitute the mushrooms. So we're just going to pour this in a little bit at a time. Now when the sauce has come to a boil, we'll just return the mushrooms in here. And we'll add some black pepper. And a splash of cream. And we'll let this cook down just a little bit before we salt it. Now let's taste the salt. Now let's add salt. All right, very good. The sauce is now ready. Now that our pan is smoking hot, I'm just going to add some neutral oil, just a little bit. And we're going to fry this on both sides until the meat thermometer reads about 150 Fahrenheit, 65 Celsius. And it's perfectly fine to flip the meat a couple of times during frying. That's perfectly fine. All right, so let's take the temperature. Yes, we are done. So let's take this off the heat. And we'll serve this with some garlic potatoes, some of this mushroom sauce we made, a little bit of salad on the side. Let's put a little parsley over here and a couple of pieces roasted peppers just for color. And here we go, finished pork steak or Kassler steak. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Finish Your Plate.